Wyoming Territory, December 1882. The snow came in sideways across the open plain, white and endless, when Declan O'Doyle spotted her alone, barefoot, clutching a thin shawl against the wind like it might save her. She was crying, but not the loud kind. Just silent tears sliding down her cheeks as she stood there in the middle of the road, like she had forgotten how to move. Declan reined in his horse. "Ma'am," he called, voice cutting through the cold. She looked up, eyes wide and red-rimmed. Her lips trembled, but no words came. The wind snapped her shawl like a flag, and her dress was soaked at the hem. Declan slid off his saddle, his boots crunching into the snow. "Where's your coat?" he asked. She shook her head, breath hitching. He didn't wait. He yanked off his long wool coat and stepped forward, wrapping it around her shoulders. "Stay," he said, firm and low. "You're safe now." She blinked up at him, breathing shallow, staring like he'd just hauled her out of a river. "My name's Declan," he said. "Can you tell me yours?" She swallowed. "Keziah," she whispered. "Keziah Porter." "All right, Keziah," he said gently. "Come on. My horse'll carry us both. We need to get you warm." She hesitated, then nodded once, and he guided her toward the horse. She moved stiffly, like her legs barely remembered how to work. He lifted her up into the saddle, careful not to startle her, then swung up behind her, holding her steady. The ride back to his cabin was slow. The storm was picking up, and he kept one arm around her to keep her from swaying. She didn't speak, but she leaned back against his chest after a while, like her body finally believed he meant no harm. Her hair smelled like cold pine and smoke. By the time they reached the cabin, her fingers were blue and she had stopped shivering, which scared him more than the crying. Inside, he got a fire roaring and set a pot of coffee on the stove. She sat near the hearth, wrapped in a dry blanket, still wearing his coat. She looked small in it, but her eyes had come back to life a little. He handed her a mug. "This'll help." She took it with both hands. "Thank you. You want to tell me what happened?" he asked, crouching near her. She stared into the flames. "My husband died this past spring," she said quietly. "Then the farm went under. I had to take work where I could." Her voice cracked. "A man from Laramie said he'd hire me to cook for his ranch hands, promised a place for me and my girls." She looked up then, eyes filling again. "But when I got there, he said it was just me he wanted, told me to leave them behind." Declan's jaw tightened. "You have children?" She nodded. "Two daughters, Nora and Nadine. I left them with a neighbor 2 counties over. I thought," her voice broke, "I thought I could send for them once I had a job, but when that man turned me out, I walked until I could not anymore." Declan sat back on his heels. "How long were you out there?" "Since yesterday." He ran a hand down his face. "You could have died." "I know." Silence stretched between them, the fire cracking and popping. Snow battered the windows. "You got anyone else?" he asked. "No, just them." He stood. "Then we're getting them." "Tomorrow." She stared up at him. "You would do that for me?" "I am not leaving 2 little girls out there hoping their mama comes back," he said. "And I do not take kindly to men who lie to women like that." Her eyes searched his, wide and stunned and wet. "You do not even know me." "I know enough." Her lip trembled again, and he looked away, giving her space. He pulled a blanket from the chest and laid it near the fire. "You sleep here. I will take the cot." She nodded, silent again. He turned in early, the wind still howling outside. But sleep did not come. He kept thinking about the way she had looked in the snow, like everything in her had broken. And the way she had leaned into him on the horse without even realizing it. In the morning, she was still asleep by the fire, his coat bundled around her. He watched her for a moment. Her face was soft now, peaceful. Younger than he had first thought, maybe 25. He made breakfast eggs and the last of the bread, and when she sat up, he handed her a plate. "You really mean to go get them?" she asked. "Of course I do." She looked at him like no one had ever meant anything to her before. They are in a town called Elkhorn Ridge. It is a half-day's ride west, he nodded. We will leave after breakfast. The trail was cold and slick, but they made good time. She rode with him again, and this time her hands clutched his coat tighter, her head resting against his shoulder. When they reached the little farmhouse on the edge of Elkhorn Ridge, two girls burst from the house before the horse even stopped. "Mama!" the older one screamed. Keziah slid down and caught them both in her arms, sobbing and laughing at once. Declan watched from the saddle, his throat tight. She looked up at him with all the love in the world shining in her eyes. He cleared his throat. "We can all head back together," he said. The neighbor, a kind older woman, helped them pack. The girls Nora and Nadine climbed up with Keziah and Declan for the ride back. It was tight but warm. That night, all four of them sat by the fire, warm and fed and safe. Keziah looked over at him as the girls nodded off. "You saved me," he met her gaze. "You saved them." She reached out, her fingers brushing his hand. "Why did you stop for me?" He gave a small shrug. "Could not leave you crying in the snow." She looked down at his coat still wrapped around her, then she looked back up. "Thank you for saying stay." He reached over and took her hand proper this time. "I meant it." And for the first time in a long time, she smiled. The wind had calmed by morning, leaving a pale frost over the hills that caught the light like glass. Declan stepped outside with a pail in hand, boots crunching over hard snow toward the well. From inside the cabin came the sound of Nora's laughter, light, skipping, like it hadn't known sorrow. He paused a moment, letting it settle in his chest before drawing water. When he returned, Keziah was setting a pan of cornbread on the stove shelf to warm. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbow, and her hair was tied back with a strip of muslin. She moved quiet but sure, as though the rhythm of a kitchen restored something in her. "You didn't have to do all that," Declan said, setting the water down. "I know," she replied without turning, "but I like to be useful, especially when someone's given me more kindness than I knew still lived in this world." He leaned against the doorframe and folded his arms. "You don't owe me anything." Her breath caught just once, then she looked over her shoulder. "Maybe not, but I've learned to pay forward what good comes my way. That's how you keep it moving." Nadine toddled toward them, dragging a wooden spoon across the floor like a toy wagon. Declan bent and scooped her up with practiced ease. "Your girls seem happy here," he said. Keziah wiped her hands on her apron. "They haven't slept through the night since we left Missouri. Last night they didn't stir once." He looked down at Nadine's hair, soft against his shoulder. "They'll be safe here, long as you need." She opened her mouth, then hesitated. "Declan, what exactly is it you do?" "I run cattle for the trading post in Rawlins. Not much profit, but it keeps the place up and the pantry full. Got a couple head out back and a deal with the station master for hides come spring." She studied his face, quiet. "You live here alone?" "I do." She nodded once, like that told her something she hadn't known to ask. Later, while the girls played near the hearth with scraps of cloth and a tin cup, Keziah stepped outside to shake out the bedding. Declan joined her with a stack of kindling in his arms. "I saw a schoolhouse near Elkhorn Ridge," she said, beating the quilt clean. "Just finished last fall. Teacher's a widow from Illinois. Mean as a hornet when it comes to arithmetic, but fair." Keziah smiled faintly. "Nora's nearly 6. She's sharp as they come. I want her to learn her letters." "She can if you stay." She paused, knuckles tight on the quilt's edge. "I've never stayed long anywhere." Declan stacked the kindling by the door. "Well, you could try." She looked up at him, eyes steady now. "And if I did, what would that mean to you?" He stepped closer, the cold air between them thinning. "It would mean I'd have something to work toward besides keeping cattle fed. It would mean I wouldn't be the only voice in this house when the wind starts howling. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I've had to get good at not hoping." "Then let's call it planning instead," he said. "Hope's too soft a word for what you fought through." She gave him a look that wasn't quite smiling, but it eased something between them. "You always talk like that, only when I mean it." That night, Keziah laid the girls down in the loft and came back down quietly. Declan was sitting by the fire, sharpening his blade with slow, sure strokes. She watched him a moment before taking the chair across from him. "I used to sew at night," she said. "After the girls went down, it helped me think." He nodded. "I've never been one for idle hands either." They sat like that for a while, the silence easy between them. Then she said, "You ever lost someone, Declan?" He set the blade aside. "My brother. He drowned in the Sweetwater River when we were boys. I still see him sometimes in dreams." She looked into the fire. "I lost a child between Nora and Nadine, born too early. I still wake up thinking I hear him crying." He leaned toward her, slow and careful. "You carry that, but you keep going. That's strength, Keziah." "Not many can do that." She met his gaze. "You're different from the men I've known." "I aim to be." She stood then, but didn't step away. "Good night, Declan." He rose too, close enough now she could feel the warmth of him. "Good night, Keziah." She held his eyes a breath longer than she meant to. Then she turned and climbed the ladder, the wood creaking under her steps. Declan watched the fire a while longer, his thoughts thick with the sound of her voice, the shape of her words. Outside, the storm had passed, and the moon laid a silver path over the snow. Inside, for the first time in years, it felt like something had just begun. The thaw came quiet in late March, slow spreading and sodden, the kind that left the ground slick with melt and the mornings edged in fog. The girls had taken to the place like roots to water. Nora followed Declan around the barn most afternoons, asking questions about bridles and fences and how to tell when a heifer was near calving. Nadine preferred Keziah's apron strings, dragging a flour-dusted rag doll through the kitchen corner to corner. Declan was in the paddock repairing a gate when Keziah came out with a tin cup in hand, steam curling from its rim. "You'll wear through those gloves before the week's out," she said, offering him the drink. He leaned back against the post and took it. "A gate like this doesn't hold up without work. Frost warped the hinges. I could ask around town, see if anyone's got the iron to spare." He nodded, sipping. "Might be a good excuse to take the wagon in. Girls could use new shoes. Nora's toes are near out." Keziah folded her arms. "I was thinking the same. She doesn't say it, but she's been hiding blisters." He studied her a long moment. "You always see what's not spoken." "I've had to. For a long time, no one asked me anything straight. I learned to read the quiet." Declan set the cup down on the fence rail. "You still thinking about leaving come spring?" She turned her face toward the hills where snow still clung in the shadows. "I was, but I'm trying to think different now. Less about running, more about building." He stepped closer, his boots sinking into the soft earth. "You'd have a place here if you chose it." She looked up at him, wind curling a loose strand of hair across her cheek. "And if I did choose it, what would that be?" "A shared roof. Field work and school days." "Whatever you want it to be," he said. "But I'd be standing beside you." Her voice dropped. "I've never known a man to say that and mean something steady by it. I do." She brushed her fingers over her skirt seam. "I'd want to earn my keep. You already have." They stood quiet then, the only sound the creak of the fence and a magpie calling from the ridge. After a moment, she reached for the cup and took a sip herself. "You always drink your coffee that strong. It's the only thing that'll keep me awake after mending harness all night." She smiled faintly, but it was different this time, not grateful or cautious, but easy, like it had come from somewhere deeper. That evening, after the girls had fallen asleep in the loft, Keziah came down with her sewing basket and settled near the hearth. Declan was at the table, sorting the month's ledger and scratching figures in the margin with a stub of pencil. "You're short on salt pork and feed," she said, glancing at his notes. He looked up. "You read numbers. My father taught me. He said no man should cheat a daughter who knew her sums." Declan leaned back. "You surprise me, Keziah Porter. I hope in better ways than worse." He closed the ledger. "Always." The fire had burned low by the time she set her needle aside. She stood, smoothing her skirt, and crossed to where he sat. "I've been thinking," she said, voice low. "If we do go to town, maybe we could ask Reverend Carson to marry us." Declan's eyes searched hers. "You certain?" "I am." He rose slowly, as if not to break the spell of her words. "Then I'll see to it first thing." She reached up and touched the side of his face, fingers light but sure. "It's not just for the girls, or the roof. It's because when you said stay, it felt like the first time I could breathe." He covered her hand with his. "And when you stayed, this place turned into something I didn't know I was missing." She leaned into him then, her forehead resting just below his chin. He wrapped his arms around her, and they stood like that, swaying slightly as the fire gave one last pop and settled into embers. Outside, the night smelled of thaw and new earth, and inside, nothing felt unfinished anymore. Rain fell steady the morning they hitched the wagon and headed east, the road into Elkhorn Ridge soft beneath the wheels. Keziah kept the girls bundled close on the seat beside her. A waxed tarp stretched over their laps. Declan drove with one hand on the reins and the other resting near her knee, not touching, but close enough she felt it like heat. They passed fields greening with spring rye, and along the banks of a swollen creek, cottonwoods stood pale and bare-limbed. The town emerged slow through the mist, a handful of buildings arranged along a muddy street, smoke curling from chimneys, the sound of a hammer ringing from the farriers. Keziah shifted, drawing her shawl tighter. "I haven't stepped into a town like this since Missouri. Last time, a man called me girl and thought that gave him rights." Declan kept his eyes ahead. "No one calls you that here. And if they try, they'll learn better." She nodded once, then looked down at Nadine, asleep against her side, mouth open just enough to show her missing front tooth. The general store was the first stop. Inside, kerosene lamps hung low over the shelves, casting a warm glow. The clerk, a balding man with a clean collar and a quiet manner, greeted Declan with a nod. "Morning, Doyle. Heard the snow took part of your north fence." "Held up better than expected," Declan replied, then turned to Keziah. "This is Miss Porter." The clerk's eyes darted to the children, something passing through his expression before he gave a small nod. "Ma'am. Let me know if you need help finding anything." Keziah walked the aisles with Nora's hand in hers, choosing needles, a length of muslin, and a small bar of lye soap. Declan picked out boots for both girls, holding them up to their feet one by one, while Nadine giggled from the barrel of fabric scraps she'd climbed into. At the counter, the clerk cleared his throat. "Reverend Carson's been asking who's keeping the Doyle place these days." Declan placed the coin purse on the wood. "He'll know soon enough." Outside, the rain had eased to a mist. They loaded the wagon and turned toward the white clapboard church at the edge of town, where the bell tower leaned slightly to the west, and a horse stood tethered beneath the eaves. Inside, the pews were empty, and the air smelled of wood polish and coal smoke. Reverend Carson emerged from the back, his hands still damp from washing. "Well," he said, wiping them on a cloth. "This a formal visit, or are you here to check the roof I keep promising to patch?" Declan glanced at Keziah, then back to the Reverend. "We'd like to be married." The Reverend's brows lifted. "You've thought it through." Keziah stepped forward. "We've lived through worse than doubt." He studied her a moment, then nodded. "There's strength in that." "I'll fetch the book." Nora and Nadine stood near the front, whispering to one another, fingers laced together. Keziah knelt beside them, smoothing their hair. "You'll stand with me, won't you?" she asked. Nora nodded, eyes bright. The ceremony was brief. No guests, no flowers, just rain tapping soft against the roof, and the warmth of hands joined, steady and sure. When Declan repeated the vows, his voice didn't waver, and when he looked at Keziah, it wasn't with promise, it was with quiet certainty, like the way a man knows the land he's worked, season after season. After they walked out into the clearing sky, pale blue stretching wide over the hills. Declan lifted Keziah into the wagon with one arm, then helped the girls up behind her. "I've never worn a ring," she said, watching the gold band catch the light. "It suits you," he said. "Strong and plain." She looked down at her hands. "My mother had one like it. She lost it in the river, and I remember her crying for days. Not because it was gold, because it meant she wasn't walking alone." "You're not," he said. "Not anymore." They rode home slow, the wagon heavy with supplies and the quiet ease of something long waited for, now settled into place. Keziah leaned against his shoulder, not out of weariness but comfort. Behind them, the girls sang low, making up verses about rain and boots and fences that didn't break. That night, in the stillness of their own cabin, Keziah stood barefoot on the worn pine floor, brushing out her hair with slow, even strokes. Declan sat near the fire, boots off, shirt sleeves rolled. "You ever think about Missouri?" he asked. "Sometimes. But less and less. The land was never mine there, just something I passed through." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "This land could be." She looked at him a long moment. "Then let's make it ours." He stood and crossed to her. She didn't step back. His hands came to rest at her waist, and her fingers found the hem of his shirt, calloused and sure. And there, in the hush of a spring night, with rain still dripping from the eaves and the fire casting soft light on the walls they'd share, they sealed a life not born in grand words or bright beginnings but in steady hands, shared work, and the unspoken vow that no one would ever stand alone again. By late May, the meadow behind the cabin had gone soft with new grass, shot through with yellow bells and the first scatter of wild lupine. Declan stood at the edge of the field one morning, watching the girls gather flowers with the kind of hushed care only children seem to know. Nora had taken to braiding stems into crowns for her sister, her fingers nimble and patient. Keziah came from the barn, wiping her hands on her apron, her sleeves dusted with straw. "There's a clutch of eggs under the feed bin," she said. "I nearly stepped on them. Hen's been hiding them again. She's clever about it. I'll leave them be a day or two more, see if she settles." Declan nodded, then turned toward the fence they'd built together, the rails straight and even, a row of young aspens planted just beyond it. "I was thinking," he said, "we could fence off a second plot south of the garden. Try beans and squash this season." She came to stand beside him, the breeze tugging at her hem. "You planning to dig it alone? Not if you've got a better back for the work." She let out a soft breath, not quite laughter, but close. "I've done harder for less." He looked at her then, and she met it steady. "You sure you're content here?" "I'm more than content," she said. "I wake up without dread in my chest. The girls sleep easy, and I don't count the days by how much I've lost." Declan reached down, picking a small stone from the earth. "I was never good at saying things straight. But you've made this place into more than I ever thought it could be. I didn't do it alone." She stepped forward and took the stone from his hand, tossing it toward the fence where it landed with a soft thud in the grass. "I got a letter," she said. From the woman who took us in back in Elkhorn when I first arrived. She said her nephew's looking to hire someone for the post office. She asked if I wanted to put in a word. He raised a brow. You thinking of going back? No. She leaned against the fence rail. But I thought about how I used to believe the only choice I had was leaving. It's the first time I've said no with both feet planted. He stepped beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. You've got roots now. She turned her head slightly toward him. We both do. That afternoon, he hitched the wagon and they rode out with a bundle of seed sacks and a crate of nails. The girls rode behind, their small hands clutching the sides, singing something low that drifted away in the breeze. They stopped at the ridge east of the property, where the land dipped into a shallow hollow. Keziah climbed down first, brushing her skirt clean as she looked over the slope. Fence line ends here. We could build a smokehouse down near the creek. Declan dropped the crate and nodded. I've got enough lumber left, just need time. I'll help with the framing. I built a lean-to once, held 3 winters. He glanced at her sidelong. You surprise me more each day. You'll get used to it. He stepped closer, his voice lower now. I don't want to get used to you. I want to keep finding things out. She looked at him, her eyes steady and warm. Then ask me something. All right. What did you want before all this? She was quiet for a long moment. I wanted someone who didn't make me small, who didn't take what I gave and leave me emptier. You've still got more to give. And you don't take, you make space. He reached for her hand, and this time she laced her fingers through his without hesitation. I want to grow old on this land with you. You will, she said. If you stop forgetting to eat when you're mending tack. He kissed her then, slow and sure, like the years ahead would be built from moments just like this, work and weather, shared hands, and nothing between them but quiet trust. That summer, the garden took hold. The girls started lessons with the widow teacher in town, riding in twice a week with Keziah while Declan traded hides and feed. On Sundays, they sat together at the back of the church, not out of distance, but comfort. By autumn, they'd built the smokehouse and the barn had a fresh coat of lime wash. Keziah took to drying herbs along the rafters, and Declan carved a cradle for the baby she hadn't told him about until the frost came. He found her in the kitchen, bent over the stove, one hand resting on her belly. I was waiting until I was sure, she said. He crossed the room in 2 steps and knelt before her, pressing his face to the soft blue cotton stretched at her middle. You've made this place whole. She cupped his face. No. We did that together. The baby came in early spring, born quiet and quick, with a full head of dark hair in her mother's mouth. Nora and Nadine watched from the loft, wrapped in quilts, holding each other tight as the midwife worked. Declan held his daughter just after dawn, the light breaking pink across the hills. He didn't say anything, just rocked her gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. Keziah lay in the bed, eyes heavy with sleep but filled with peace. You've given me everything, he said softly. She smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. I only gave what I had left. You made it enough. They named the baby Ruth. Years passed like water through a slow bend in the river. The girls grew tall and sure-footed. The aspen trees filled in, casting long shadows over the fence line. The house grew too, room by room, built with the same hands that had once carried each other through storms and hunger and silence. And when Declan and Keziah sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun drop low over the pasture, they didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Their love lived in the worn path between the barn and the hearth, in the way she still reached for his hand without thinking, and the way he filled her teacup before his own. No grand speeches. No declarations. Just a quiet, lasting bond strong as the land beneath their feet, and as enduring as the wind that once carried her crying through the snow, straight into his arms.